Our Plant Stories has been nominated as a finalist in the Independent Podcast Awards in a new category called Environment and Natural World. I'll let you know how we get on. Thanks to all those who are regular supporters of the podcast with their commitment to buying a monthly coffee. And to Anne, who also sent some caffeine my way this month, all of which goes towards paying for this podcast, the hosting platform and the editing programme. The link is in the show notes. And now, a plant story. Welcome to Our Plant Stories and the second episode about highlines or urban parks in the sky, turning old railway tracks, viaducts, bridges into spaces to garden and be close to nature. But it takes a lot of tenacity and imagination to make it happen.
So this staircase sort of reminds me of whenever I go up it, I'm reminded of there's a scene in one of the Jurassic Park films where they're being attacked by pterodactyls, which is what always comes to my mind when I walk through this funny caged staircase.
And today's guest seemingly has both in abundance. In the previous episode, I was able to walk along the first section of the Castlefield Viaduct in Manchester. For this episode, we can only walk along the roads in Camden in London because the Camden Highline is a project in planning, as we'll discover. It will link Camden Town and King's Cross via a 1.2 kilometre long urban park. The design team, led by James Corner at Field Operations, is the same team that worked on the New York Highline. My guide as we dodged the traffic, crossing busy roads, admiring bridges, imagining new stairs and lifts up to the park, was the Chief Executive of the Camden Highline, Simon Pitkeathley. Simon has been the CEO of the Business Improvement District, or BID, Camden Town Unlimited, since 2007, and that has grown and developed with the Camden Collective, providing free workspace in vacant buildings, and now the Camden Highline, all aiming to maintain and improve Camden Town's reputation as a place to work and visit. I hope you enjoy the walk. So we are sitting here on an absolutely beautiful autumnal day in the heart of Camden. There's a quiet spot in the heart of Camden outside your offices, which actually, can we just describe your offices to me?
Well, I think of it as a sort of weird little campus, isn't it? There's a rather beaten up old auction rooms building here. There's some blue containers here, which we use as an office. There's the old Hawley Infant School there, and they're all part of our collective, we call it Camden Collective, our collective campus. And it's great fun being here, and there's lots of young people doing stuff.
So we're going to go and walk part of the route of the proposed Camden Highline. Tell us a little bit about it. Where does that idea for a highline come from?
Well, I think highlines have been around since the Parisian one, 40 years ago? Anyway, quite a long time. But then, of course, the New York one really kind of lifted everyone's awareness of highlines and things like that. And it was an academic at UCL called Oliver O'Brien who loved the New York Highline and did a bit of an aerial study of places in London you could do it. And this one became the most obvious one to do. And there was a local paper called the Kentish Towner, they picked up on it. And a former board member of mine who was then living in Toronto, who was former Kentish Towner, was still getting the Kentish Towner publication, and his wife spotted it and told him he should do it when he retired and moved back, which he does. He's now my chair. And so there's been a sort of series of lots of people going, oh, this is a good idea, you should do that. And we went, okay.
How tenacious do you have to be to get something like this off the ground? This is not something that you have an idea for and a couple of years later we're walking on the Highline, is it?
Sadly not, no. There is a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of treacle, as we call it, to get through. Obviously, you've got to raise the money, and that's a big ask as well. But, you know, we had to raise £1 million before we could get through the first stage of planning. So, you know, that just tells you, in a sense, the scope of what you've got to do. But in many ways, I think the hardest part, I think I will look back on this, is wading through all those internal procedures of the various bureaucracies that you have to interact with. As you can see, we're quite a fleet of foot small organisation, and we butt up against these super tankers, and we have to, in a way, behave like them and think like them in order to, manage our way through those processes. And that, I think that is it develops quite an interesting skill set, I suspect.
We saw a kind of workshop going on with school children. Tell me, what is that about?
Well, that is a particular project that we just started this year thanks to money from the Lottery Heritage Fund. So this is specifically about tracking the heritage around the High Line. So we've got, I think, 25 workshops with local schools coming. And then we've also got, but before that, we'd done 1,000 hours with local school kids prior to this. And here they come past us now. Actually, so they are trying to understand the heritage around the High Line. But I think it's not just about heritage. It's not just about trying to get young people interested, although all that matters. Generally this thing will go through communities, and we want that to be part of the story. I think it did sort of happen to the New York High Line that they'd spent so long wading through treacle and raising the money that they actually found that they'd almost forgotten about the local community, and they had to double back and kind of work on that. And we've interacted with them a lot, the founders of the New York High Line, and tried to learn their lessons. And so from early doors we thought, let's try and get this bit right. And of course it's very different engaging with people who own property in Kentish Town or in and around the High Line. You could imagine that's a very different community than the people, say, at Maiden Lane, right at the other end. And getting your engagement right for both of those, not something I would ever claim that we've done perfectly at all, but recognising the difference is an important part of that. Over 2,000 people have been on the walk that we're doing today at ground level. We've also had to, of course, develop relationships with the Mayor of London, with Camden Council, with TfL, with Network Rail, and the GLA family more widely. It is a process of, and we say wading through treacle, and it's not to be too disparaging about the treacle. It's just that it moves at a slower pace.
Brilliant. Well, look, let's do the walk, and we'll talk along the way, and we'll get to plants as well, won't we? Because they're part of it. They're a big part too. Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting phenomenon. When I was in New York, I went with a group of people from London recently, and we were on the High Line there and noticing how there really isn't graffiti or drug-associated activity on the New York High Line. And yet, at ground level all around it, there is evidence of it. And it's just an interesting thing that these spaces, presumably because of the footfall and because they are curated and managed, they're not like a sort of council park, they just, for some reason, either push away or don't attract antisocial behaviour in the same way, it would seem.
That's interesting, because I'm imagining that is a concern of some residents.
Oh yeah, very much so, yeah. So yeah, I think and we elected from the start to close it at sort of park hours. So it's already a secure site because it's next to a live train. So you can't get up there anyway. And we will close it at dusk and open it at dawn in the same way that parks do. And that's partly to, because that's a better way to manage a space like that. But it's also, recognising people's concerns about antisocial behaviour and things like that. Yeah.
But that's a bit, as you say, operating a bit like parks do.
Yeah.
They open and close. Will there be people up there as well?
Very much so, yeah. I mean, a mixture of sort of volunteers, gardeners and security. You have to do, like at closing time in a linear park, you have to close sort of from the middle out. So you make sure that people aren't trapped up there. So it does require quite a lot of staffing and maintenance. And I think using the New York model, we recognise that there's no point trying to build this thing and then seeing if you can hand it over to the council to run. It just takes too much resource to do that. So we've taken on the responsibility of being the eternal provider, if you like, to make sure that it's not just amazing when it opens, but it stays amazing in perpetuity.
Tell me where we are and what we're looking at.
So we are looking over a part of Camden Lock, the sort of eastern part of it on Kentish Town Road. There's a double lock here. A lock and a weir, which is sort of more unusual in canals. And to the right of us is the new Hawley Wharf development that's part of Camden Market, which is where that picture was taken from, looking down onto Camden Gardens over here, which we'll visit next. But, it's quite quintessentially Camden, this. Places to kind of, visit and drink and eat over there, and office space and residential, all overlooking this, former transport hub. So the High Line would start from the Camden Gardens Park here on our right.
Okay.
You can imagine walking up Camden High Street, coming to the famous bridge, turning right, and then it'll take you into entrance 1 or 4, depending on which way you're coming. The High Line just over here.
And then, so there'll be a stairs or lift?
Well, if we go over there, I'll show you.
Simon, where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Manchester, and I grew up in a place called Reading, which I left when I was 18, and then I moved to London, and I've been in this part of London really ever since. Yeah.
So you really see yourself as a Londoner? And
yeah,
as
I think
Camden...
so, yeah.
What does someone from Camden call themselves?
A Camdenite,
perhaps?
Yeah, perhaps so. Yeah.
But really steeped in this.
Yeah,
this
and
art.
I've been doing this job of running the business improvement district for 17 years now. So, we started as just a sort of small entity, and we've grown into 4 organisations, one of which is the Camden Highline. So yeah, I kind of, I'd say I've grown up here. I have grown up here, but of course I grew up somewhere else. But, yeah. So yeah, there should be a new pedestrian crossing here. So, unfortunately, Camden Gardens is, home to quite a lot of antisocial behaviour. And I think one of the ways in which you deter that is having footfall. So the lift will go up here, but the stairs will come up over here, return in the air. There'll be a parapet along here because we can't punch through the brick, and then we'll actually punch through the metal bridge there, and then you'll be able to walk back, and there'll be things like viewing platforms for the trains, because we love the trains. We want the trains to be very much part of people's experience when they're up there, concession on the end as well with a loo in it, which I think would be helpful for the area, and then this middle arch will be completely open still for people to move through.
Is it very much in your head now? You've been with it for so long. Do you stand here, and I'm obviously trying to visualise it, but do you just see it, visualise it?
Probably forgive me if I just explain it as if I am looking at it.
I love
that.
Of
course, of course. We've been doing this for however long it is now. Of course, you imagine it as it will be, of course.
How long, I know you're wading through treacle, how long do you think before we'll walk up that staircase?
Well, I think we are still on a timeline to get the first section, which is this bit that we're under now, to the second entrance. We are still on a timeline to have that open early 27. So, fair winds don't help you when you're stuck in treacle. I'm not sure how far I can push that analogy, but anyway. But, provided we can keep moving forward through the treacle, provided we can, get a fair wind behind us, that's still perfectly doable. But that's only section 1. And then you need to build the next 2 sections. But as with all these things, the proof of concept is when you got section 1 open, and then it becomes much easier. And I think we've really learnt that from Castlefield, looking at what they've done there, and I think we'll copy their idea of having a sort of glass window at the end of the first section, so you can really imagine what comes next. And it's been very helpful in a sense, being able to have both New York and Castlefield as examples to talk with and to, and understand their issues. And they're different to us, but there's a lot of, and it's a very supportive network as well. It really doesn't feel competitive. It's nice for that.
Because everyone kind of knows what the treacle's like, and you just have to get to the other end, and so it's quite great to see someone who's done it and know actually that's going to be us.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Can I take a photograph of you near where your lift is going to go up?
Yeah.
That would be great.
I'm taking my hat off. We're going under the arches at Camden Road Overground Station now, so we're beneath the platforms, and you can hear the train above us. And in these arches are commercial spaces. And what you get a real sense of here is we're coming up to this funny little white tunnel, which gives you a sense of the depth that we'll be playing with on those disused platforms. So you can see down here, this is all space up there that is under the High Line, which is difficult for audio, I understand. But
No.
you just get a real sense of how much space up there is in fact sat vacant.
Oh, so this is okay. So this is, if we were to walk this passage.
Yes.
We're walking from one side of the High Line to the other.
The width.
The width.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
Exactly right.
So
and
I now.
what you don't realise, it's quite a nice echo in here.
Lovely.
What you don't realise when you're on the, say, eastbound platform at Camden Road Overground Station, because there's what looks like a bit of bush and a rickety old fence behind you, is there used to be 2 more platforms there, which took up a lot of space on the viaduct. And so that's where there's about 20 metres of space there. So this is all up here.
We're looking up to the edge of.
So the northern edge of what will be the High Line.
Yeah. High Line.
And this is all space that, well, it's publicly owned, but it's completely inaccessible and unused, that will turn into a beautiful park.
I love the way, and I need to take some photographs of this. We've got Mexican fleabane growing up around the arch, and then we've got Buddleia. Of course, we've got Buddleia growing out of the top.
I know.
Of the actual kind of platform.
The London Wildlife Trust did our environmental report for the planning application, and I thought, my naivety about these things, that after at least 35 years of neglect, and that this place would be very diverse and biodiverse. But of course it turns out that no, there's 2 species that have dominated everything, and it's very undiverse, and we can improve the biodiversity very easily with just a bit of curation.
And it's one of those Buddleia.
Yeah, of course. And of course that you do, meet people who only see it from a very, very narrow perspective, when can I get up there? When can I do some planting? Or why is it near me? Or, and it's, whereas we have to constantly think about it in the round, and this won't work if we only think about one aspect. And that's just, again, part of that challenge, really.
Yeah, it's easy to kind of get excited about the planting aspect, she says, from her own perspective.
Yeah.
Thinking, and you've been on a beautiful High Line, you know how wonderful the grasses are, or you know how, so that walk in nature or looking down on the streets below.
Yeah.
But I guess if you focus too long on there, you're not going to get to the actual process of how do you.
There is so much more to do before you get there. They really are the nice sort of finishing touches.
But have you also got challenges there about how you transport soil?
Yes, getting material up there. I mean, fortunately, there's a very helpful group of Network Rail engineers in a depot just a bit further down who are really keen for this to happen. So they keep coming out with cute ways of getting soil up there. But yeah, it's a challenge. Let's just try and cross what we can.
Yeah.
There isn't much you look at here that isn't a challenge. It's like gunfire.
Love that sound. Love that sound.
And the interesting thing as well is that because obviously I've been up there, it's much louder under the trains than it is next to them.
Yeah, in Castlefield you have the trams, of course. Don't
Yes,
you?
yeah. But actually we get even closer than they do in places which we can see later on.
To the live trains.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it, when you have a real vision for something, because you clearly do, how do you cope with the fact that perhaps sometimes not everybody along that High Line shares that same vision or has concerns about it? Are you just,
Does it hurt?
Kind of.
It does a bit. I think it's to do with, we have a culture of NIMBYism in this country that is, I feel like, has got a bit more angry in recent years. And of course, everyone only thinks of their own backyard. But yes, it's sad when people don't see the vision. But, frankly, it's just all part of the treacle. We do at least have democratic processes for dealing with this stuff. And almost the hardest bit is people feeling that even though you're going through all the right processes and going above and beyond, they still accuse you of not doing that. And that's quite hard. But, you've got to have a bit of a thick skin as well. And the beauty is that we get so much support and so many people wanting to. I mean, one of my big frustrations is the number of people. In fact, I've got a chap who's very helpful to us, who is in his late 80s and keeps saying, I want to be able to do my gardening up there. I want to go up there and prune, you know. When are you going to build it before I, while I still can, you know. And so, that, you know, there's for every, there aren't that many moaners. There are an awful lot of heartwarming, supportive comments. So, yeah, it's nice.
And tell me a bit more about who's going to do the planting.
Well, Piet Oudolf is, I confess some ignorance here. I hadn't quite realised what a big deal Piet was until I did a walkabout with him, the same walk we're doing now, and posted a picture on my Instagram of him and me, and then suddenly realised that, you know, half the planting world was interested in everything he does. So, but I think his, you know, rewilding approach is very much in keeping with what we'd like this space to be, and yeah, people know him as a sort of a demigod, a guru of that world, and so I think we're very lucky to have him as part of the design team.
Do you have a garden?
I do, but a very small one, which I'm just having redone.
And did you grow up around plants?
No. I was grew up mostly in sort of suburban-y places, where there are gardens, but mowing the grass in my mum's house was not my favourite job, but it tended to fall to me. So that sort of gardening, I fell out of love with very early. So I'm much more interested in the sort of urban gardening that we will engage with on the Highline. We're obviously just passing Camden Garden Centre here, which is another interesting landmark, and we're just walking into Elm Village, which is one of the 3 big Camden estates that the Highline cuts through, and we're obviously on the south side of it now, so we've crossed underneath. You know, a very different part of the world to the, you know, rather shishi houses in and around Camden Road and Kentish Town, but, you know, just as much part of Camden's landscape as everyone else, you know.
It's interesting, Camden's always had a big tourist footfall, hasn't it?
Yeah. Camden Town has.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's an interesting thing that the Highline will do, which is that visitor economy part of Camden Town and the visitor economy part of King's Cross are sort of, in a way, helping to pull the centre of gravity of central London a bit north, and the Highline kind of joining them up is quite a neat way of representing that or delineating that, more centralising of this bit of London, which is another interesting thing. Because the thing about projects like this is so many aspects you get involved in that you didn't realise.
Give me some examples.
Well, understanding, you know, the depth of love for Piet Oudolf, or what biodiversity really meant.
We're about to head to the dinosaurs. Oh, and the trains. But I just wanted to say that I hope you'll share the word about this proposed Highline. You could share this podcast episode. Maybe sign up to the Camden Highline newsletter so you'll know what's happening. Because this is a charity that has got to raise the funds to make this happen. So spreading awareness of the project is key. I'll put all the links plus photographs of this walk on our plantstories.com.
What we're looking at now will be the sort of second widest part here. So you can see all that scrubland up there.
Yep.
And a sort of grey box, which I'm hoping we can get rid of. That's all another very deep part of the Highline.
Quite a lot of trees up there. I mean,
yeah.
That's quite a deep area.
It is. And of course what's nice about that is it's actually on plantable land.
Right, okay.
So a lot of the places we're going to have to basically put bags up, and you won't be able to plant trees or anything that's got too deep roots, because A, there's contamination in the soil that's there, which we're going to have to treat or barrier, and B, you just haven't got the depth. You know, you think of that bridge, you just won't be able to get a lot of depth.
So you'll take the soil up in bags and plant into the bags?
Exactly, and partly because we are effectively dealing with a temporary project, because we can only get, Network Rail will never give you a 100-year lease. They just can't think like that. So you have to act as if, okay, if they need the land back, then we can, you know, you have to do all your return on investment and everything based on the terms of the lease.
So you
which
can't
is,
think this is forever, basically. You've got
Yeah,
to know that.
I mean,
yeah,
you know,
I hope it is, but you know,
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's the way, and you saw the being while use spaces that we've been in before. We're kind of used to doing that, and it helps that we've got that background because it gives some reassurance to the landowners that, you know, we're not going to squat it and say you can't take it back. You know, we will be good citizens in that way. So this here, this bit of land, which is called a triangle, which doesn't look anything like a triangle.
It's tiny.
Is where we hope to have an additional entrance. So Camden have got an aspiration to include it within the development that will go up here and the other side of the bridge.
Right.
But, and I've sat in these meetings and I may not get this entirely right, but it's something like it is owned, has controlling interests by the Department of Transport, Network Rail, the Arch Company, Camden Council, the GLA, High Speed 1. I think there might be another one. Anyway, you can imagine trying to get all those bureaucracies to, in a sense,
You mean this little patch of land we're
little
talking
patch
about?
of-
How
yeah.
many cars could you park on there if you parked them literally side by side?
I don't know, 15 maybe, 20?
Yeah.
You know? Goes under the arches quite a long
okay,
way.
okay.
Although they're gated off, you can't really see that.
That staircase takes you up
We're
to the
going to
other
go
end.
there. Yeah, so this staircase sort of reminds me of... whenever I go up it, I'm reminded of there's a scene in one of the Jurassic Park films where they're being attacked by pterodactyls. Which is what always comes to my mind when I walk through this funny caged staircase, which is quite hard to describe actually. It is like a caged staircase that you might see in one of the Jurassic Park films surrounded by pterodactyls.
So we were luckily dinosaurs, we avoided them. But what are we looking?
So we're looking at some. It's basically storage.
Yeah.
We're looking down on the sort of pipes and tubes, girders, really circular girders that would have been one of the gas holders at King's Cross, I assume, that are just sort of piled up in a corner with a bit of Harris fencing around them.
Yeah. I guess where do you put them if you've
Yeah.
you know when you take them down you've got to put them somewhere. haven't you?
Yeah. So I think the arches have got other bits of that sort of kit in. So all of behind here, this will all be part of the red line that's the High Line. You can see there's a lot of space there. But this is presumably linked to the Maiden Lane estate. And we get quite conflicting signals from people within the estate. So some will say, well, look, you're going to have a lovely curated High Line space there, and we're left with, you know, these unmanaged sort of areas right around it. Why don't you incorporate this so that it's less available for antisocial behaviour and more looked after? And then other people saying, you know, no, this is important to us, leave it alone. So we just try and work with whatever we've got.
What really strikes me as we do this walk is there are so many different pockets
Yes.
of space and land that you have got to negotiate with
Yeah.
along this way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, the High Line itself is all Network Rail.
Yeah.
But it abuts lots of things. James Corner, who's the main, who leads the design team at field operations, you know, he describes this as sort of borrowed landscape. So it's not necessarily part of the High Line itself,
Right.
but you know, you could fence it off and never have anything to do with it, or
You could
could
incorporate
curate it
it.
in some way so that at least people looked at it, or you can make it part of the maintenance. You know, it's and there are associated costs with that and everything. But you know, it's trying to kind of get clarity on what other people want, and then coming to a view on what works for everyone. It's just another part of what you have to do, really.
So we are now the closest that we can get to the High Line?
When you're not actually on the High Line itself, this is the closest you can get, and you can see that this is a very narrow spot here. So there'll be a fence right up where the trains are. We'll hopefully get a train in a minute, and you'll be able to sort of hear the noise from it, because they're not that loud. But some people have said, oh, what about the noise from people walking up there? Well, you know, it's not going to be as much as a freight train coming down here. But equally, they're not that loud. Here you go. So we can talk over the top of that. You know, it's they're speed limited. It's not like being next to an intercity train. You know, they only travel at I think it's 20 miles an hour. I'm not sure. Obviously, the freight trains are louder and longer. But yeah, there's lots. You know, there's been a concern that the High Line will generate lots of noise, but it seems slightly unlikely complaint given where we're located. But there we are.
It's rather lovely that you will be up where it's happening. It's a.
I think there's several things. For me, these spaces that are always this sort of 8-10 feet above everything else have a different feel to them.
Completely.
There's just a calmness, perhaps it's air quality, I don't know, but they just engender this sense of calmness, even when there's a train line trundling next to you, that you don't get at ground level. And I think that's a really important part of all, any High Line has that. And I just think it's, that separation from the ground, that perspective on the city that you're just not quite used to. But also I just think they're places to just lose yourself a little bit. That calmness is such an important part of it, I think. But you can also see it goes back a long way here. We'll be able to have some, seating and, classroom space. We've got some plans for some allotments. There won't be enough for everyone to have an allotment. But, some... as soon as you say that, someone says, I want an allotment, it won't be like that. But, places that people can come and do planting. And look and feel the trains. I think it's like seeing trains in the wild. Again, slightly naively, because you're used to seeing a train at a platform, and you'll see here now. Look, you can see the wheels. It's quite nice. They're bigger and taller than I expect them to be somehow. And it's I like that. It's nice.
And for now, that is where we will leave Simon, watching trains in the wild. But we will come back to this High Line. Perhaps we can do an annual visit to the Castlefield Viaduct and the Camden Highline to see how they're progressing. I so admire the tenacity of the people who make it their job to, as Simon puts it, wade through the treacle, so that others of us in due course will be able to walk these High Lines and find those spaces of calm above the city. Our Plant Stories is an independent podcast, produced and presented by me, Sally Flatman. Thank you for listening. If you want to show your support for this podcast via Buy Me a Coffee, then the link is in the show notes or on the website ourplantstories.com. I promise you, your virtual coffee will go towards the podcast, not plants.